Hello and welcome to Hong Kong Heritage. Later in the programme, Phil Kenny, who writes a blog about Hong Kong and Macau film stuff, talks to me about the Bond movie, The Man with the Golden Gun, which was partly filmed in Hong Kong in the early 1970s. Its James Bond, Roger Moore, died last month. But first, conservationist Katie Law of the Central and Western Concern Group talks to me about the Tong Lau of Central, Chinese tenement buildings largely constructed in the 1950s and under threat of demolition from the Urban Renewal Authority's, or URA's, H19 project. The URA has submitted a plan to the Town Planning Board asking for larger plot ratio, and the public consultation is open for another 2 weeks.
We're sitting in a little park just off Hua Yin Fong East and Hua Yin Fong West, which is some very small lanes beside Shing Wong Street in Shangwan. So this is a lovely area, and we are surrounded by many Tong Lau, which is the very heart of Old Central.
Yes, it is. And I mean, most of these Tong Lau are only 3 or 4 stories, aren't they?
Yeah, they're beautiful. And this is a very old area of Hong Kong, really. Shing Wong Street being named after a Shing Wong temple, which existed on the site of the PMQ. So the police married quarters? Yeah, police married quarters in the 1840s. And it was one of the very early temples in Hong Kong. No longer here now because it was knocked down to build the Central School. And that was before the police married quarters too. But the name Shing Wong has remained to become the name of this street. So this is definitely a very, very historic area, but it's also facing threat of development by the Urban Renewal Authority.
What is a Tong Lau exactly?
Basically, it simply means a Chinese tenement building. There are quite a lot of Tong Lau in Hong Kong, ranging from some very old ones in the central, in Wellington Street, for example. We have a Tong Lau dating to the 1870s. It's called the Wing Wall Grocery Shop, which recently has been announced that it will be preserved. We have some not so old Tong Lau, but they are still of historic value, of course, like these in Shing Wong Street, Wingley Street. They were built after the Second World War.
Yeah, so these Tong Lau stem from the early 1950s or thereabout.
Yeah. Because this area was quite seriously affected during the war. It has been destroyed by bombing and by some people locking down the houses. For example, the Central School has been knocked down because of the bombing and also because people looking for firewood. So this Tong Lau area has been destroyed during the Second World War. And the Tong Lau that we see today was rebuilt after the war.
What is the significance of these houses as opposed to any others?
They are at the heart of this our historic city, being like the flesh of the historic city. But unfortunately, many of them has been demolished in recent years for development, and now we are getting, fewer and fewer of them. So it really become, increasingly precious, especially if we are talking about conserving the historic area of Central. Then these houses are important as one of the very integral part of the old city.
What is the URA, or the Urban Renewal Authority, what are they proposing for this area?
The URA call this area H19, one of their redevelopment areas. And they are proposing to knock down all the Tong Lau in this area, about, 20 of them. And they are proposing 2 high-rise residential towers with retail shops and podium at the bottom. It will be a big change for this area, a very sad change if it is going to happen, because the Tong Lau in this area, they're really beautiful, and some of them are actually really nicely renovated by their owners.
But are they largely private or are they empty at the moment?
I would say half and half. For those that are still occupied. They have been renovated. As you can see, some of them along Staunton Street. As we can see from some of the old photos, the Staunton Street and Shing Wong Street areas, there was a very vibrant market in here. So there are, stores and shops and grocery shops, and the Tong Lau are all filled with people. So they are mostly working class people or the people who run the shops and the stores.
And what sort of building did you grow up in? Because you come from this area, don't you?
Yeah, I have lived on King Road for a long time, over 40 years. So at the beginning, I lived in a small building, not a tonglao, but with an elevator.
Ooh!
Yeah. It's a nice area, King Road, and I still remember my school was there, Sacred Heart Canossian College, a very historic school with really beautiful buildings. But it had to move to Pok Fu Lam when I reached secondary school. So it's quite unfortunate that our historic building was knocked down at that time. I think that's probably why I treasure the historic buildings and the neighborhoods in this area, because once you lost it, and they will be gone forever, and it's so hard to turn back and say to see them again.
How do you, when you build a, like the one we're looking at, when you build a tonglao on a slope, what's involved in the foundations there?
Well, they have a foundation.
Yeah, I'd hope so.
But, they don't have to be very deep foundation because it's just like a 3 or 4 story building. As long as they are just a low-rise building, it's pretty okay. It's not difficult to build. But, of course, one very important factor is whether that slope or the terrace have been formed properly and with a very good retaining wall behind. And that's the interesting thing about this historic landscape is, as the whole of the city of Victoria in this area was built on a slope. So it really took a lot of effort to flatten the land and to safeguard the slope behind it with good retaining walls. That's why we can find a lot of retaining walls built with granite stones, all along the Hollywood Road and the Shing Wong Street or behind Wingley Street, built with really beautiful granite stones, and sometimes there are wall trees as well. So this talks a lot about our old city and how our ancestors worked to make this a livable area.
Now, the government has actually also, was at the Tourism Bureau, I noticed recently, has been doing some form of historic central project.
In fact, they are recently they are doing a very aggressive promotion of the Old Town Central. And you can see banners and posters everywhere along the escalator and on some of the historic buildings too, promoting to the tourists that they should visit this beautiful part of Old Central in Hong Kong.
Well, that's good, isn't it?
Well, it's good in a way that the government, the tourism board, they are, aware of this treasure and this gem of Central. It's good that they acknowledge its significance. But on the other hand, it's kind of ironic because the government or the Urban Renewal Authority is still being given a free hand to destroy this very part of the old city. I mean, the ERA just, put in an application to this area, H19, to increase the plot ratio of the buildings that they are going to build. And they have no, sympathy to all these tonglao at all. I mean, in their plan, they're all going to be knocked down.
But you're obviously, you're into nostalgia, looking back to your childhood. But I mean, are you realistic, really? I mean, this is an economic town. You are an activist and you say, save this, save that. But isn't there an economic factor? Who's supposed to finance it all?
Well, the fact that we can see is that all over Soho and Poho, there are owners who really love their tonglao and put in a lot of resources to renovate their property and nicely, and to really preserve this integral part of our old city to show to the public and to our visitors. I mean, that is definitely an economic action, right? And I think there is so much to it about the property, how to give it, to upgrade its value by using renovation. And also there is this value, which is a cultural and social value, which, their renovation and conservation have added to our society and to the city of Hong Kong. I mean, that's not just monetary, but it's also cultural and social.
Well,
and also good for the tourists as well to see.
Yeah, but I'm more interested in local people, to be honest. I mean, I think too many things are, what the tourists might think of Hong Kong. I think that's valuable. But I think sitting here with you on a bench in an area where we are looking at some 3-story, 4-story buildings, or some Tong Lau, but up above you can hear the drills already, and there's some, good 25-story buildings around us. And I think there's an issue of looking at greenery and being able to breathe.
Of course, the Tong Lau not only provide, like a historic testimony to our society, it also allows us to have a breathing space in this very, overdeveloped and overcrowded city. The drilling that we hear is actually from the Bridges Street Market, which is also a post-war market building, which has been preserved and will be turned into a news expo. So it's
a news expo.
It's called a news expo. It's mainly for the media, the news industry to showcase probably some of their printing machines or their newspapers, historic archive, etc. So it's in one of the revitalizing program for historic building.
What are the characteristics of a Tong Lau versus any other kind of building?
Now, for example, we are looking at a building on Shing Wong Street, number 17 and number 18. And it's 3-story. The interesting about it is that it is built on the steep, a step street. So it's one side lower and another side a bit higher. They have balconies, and in the middle, because there is a common staircase, they have ventilation grills, which allows very nice ventilation and sun to go in the staircase. Normally, they have iron frame for the windows. And they have quite a lot of windows, I would say. And this one, the window frames are painted green, which is very classic. Some of the entrance and also the railing of the staircase, they use terrazzo. So this is a typical material.
Terrazzo? What's that?
It's a mix of some of the small stones with the cement. So terrazzo is a typical materials the architects and builders used in the 50s and 60s for the surface of some of the entrance and also the railings of the common staircase.
A.H. Bastow created these couple of Tong Lau in Staunton Street on the corner with Shing Wong Street. Now, what do we know about him? Did he design any other buildings in Hong Kong?
Well, actually, in this neighborhood, aside from number 88 to 19 Staunton Street, he also built a few buildings in Wah Yin Fong West. Smaller buildings, but really, nice looking. And he also built other quite substantial buildings in Hong Kong, including the St. Louis School in the Western District, St. Anthony's Church, and also the Shing Kwong Church in Causeway Bay. In fact, even the Tung Tak Pawn House in Wan Chai was built by him.
So what would you say his style is?
Since he is a Portuguese, I think he also demonstrates that Western style in his building, as we can see from the churches. But since most of these buildings are built either slightly pre-war or post-war, so he demonstrates the modernist architectural style, which is very popular during that time, with simple and very structural lines and functional style, and not so much decoration. I think the very unique characteristic is his simplicity and functionalism. And for the Tong Lau building in here, for example, number 88 to 90 Staunton Street, although the front part of the Tong Lau looks very much the same as in those on the Shing Wong Street or in Wingley Street, but on the rear part, we can see rounded balconies on both sides of the Tong Lau, which I think is a very unique feature for this particular building.
Now, H19 itself, I mean, what sort of expanse is that area that has been earmarked by the URA?
This is a project which has been started for quite some years now, and almost 20 years. And at the beginning is quite a large area from Wingley Street in the west to Aberdeen Street to the east, and from Staunton Street along, behind the PMQ and, above, going up to the hill. But it has also experienced some changes over the year. Of course, quite recently is the removal of the entire Wingley Street from this area. So right now, there are only 2 sites left. They call it Site B and Site C because Site A is Wingley Street, which has been removed. So Site B is the one, bounded by Shing Wong Street and Staunton Street and Wah Yin Fong East. Site C is closer to Aberdeen Street and is bounded by Chung Hua Lane. So it's only 2 small area, but with, about 20 Tong Lau here. The URA recently put in an application to the Town Planning Board to further raising the plot ratio. And it has...
What does that mean?
They want to build higher and bigger and more commercial retail space and podium.
Now, part of this area is also the historic 30 houses.
This name is a very old and traditional name for this area. They call it the 30 houses. I've heard that it's from a long time ago, this name, and today I think only the very old Gai Fong will know this name. But this name has been preserved by the Hungry Ghost Festival, which is organized in this neighborhood every year. Well, this year in September. And it is a really amazing and colorful festival which honored our ancestors and of this neighborhood. This 30-house Gai Fong Hungry Ghost Festival actually has a shop in this H19 area on Staunton Street. The only place where we can see the name of 30 houses, presented because it's in there, the shop signed. Telling us this. Where we are sitting in the H19 area is in fact the traditional 30 houses area.
Yeah, because I always feel, that I'm 48. My parents still live in the house I was born in southern England. Now, they might sell up later on, but, for me, there is a real sense of place. I go back, the town where I come from has a Norman Abbey. It's over 1,000 years old. For Hong Kong, when you have older people in Hong Kong, or even, my generation, so how do they get their sense of place, in terms of traditions, in terms of festivals? It's all on the move.
It's really so important, this older neighborhoods, and with still, some of the houses and the streets and the lanes that remain. Because I saw many times that older people come back to this neighborhood to try and find the house that they once lived in, or to try and see if they can meet some of their neighbors. So the value of these places are really, they act as an anchor to our feelings and to our attachment of that place. That we still have somewhere to come back and search for, our past, our experience, and our history. And this is exactly why these historic neighborhoods are so important for conservation and for us to study and to understand our past. If we don't know, for example, about the name of these 30 houses, maybe to the younger generations, it can mean nothing if we don't tell them and we don't explain to them the story behind. But it is so important because it is about the growth of our city. All these older neighborhoods, Tong Lau, the streets and terraces and, the lanes, it actually is the fabric of this very history of Hong Kong. And it is important for us to study, to understand, to document, and to spread this message. Because the young people are in fact very interested to know their past. We have organized tours for this 30 houses area last Saturday, and the tour attracted over 30 people from all over Hong Kong, different districts.
So are you going to be holding those quite regularly? Or?
Yes, we want to, because people don't actually know this area before. But they find it really interesting. And, we said we are going to take you on a tour of the 30 houses area. Before they came, they don't know what is the 30 houses area. But we tried to explain to them. We took them to different parts, to Wingley Street, to see the Tong Lau on the terrace, to Wah Yin Fong, to see the tonglao, which were built on a stepped street. So there are different forms. They are of different forms of tonglao on a very landscape that is a very historic landscape.
Katie Law there of the Central and Western Concern Group. If you'd like to look at the URA's plans or voice your views, the public consultation with the Town Planning Board is open for another 2 weeks. If you'd like to learn more about the 30 houses, the old neighbourhood located on the hillside behind the former police married quarters in Central, then there's an exhibition outside number 17 Xinguang Street, highlighting work by local artists on the 30 houses theme. The exhibition at number 17 Xinguang Street is on until June the 25th. I was reading recently in the South China Morning Post that out of 3 Bond films that were partly set in Hong Kong, Roger Moore was the only actual Bond to come here. In The Man with the Golden Gun, you also see him jump off a police launch and onto the wreck of the ocean liner, the Queen Elizabeth, which was owned by former chief executive Tung Chee-hwa's father and mysteriously caught fire in 1972. Phil Kenny writes a blog called Hong Kong and Macau Film Stuff, posts about Hong Kong film locations used in a variety of international films. I asked him which Hong Kong bits spring to mind when he thinks of the movie.
I think the main bits really, they were only here for a few weeks, and so you don't really see a great deal, but what you do see, you see, for example, the hydrofoil coming in from Macau, and then Bond disembarking at the old ferry terminal in Seungwan before jumping into a car and going to the peninsula.
So do they cheat on the geography then?
Yes, they cheated on the geography, but films always do that. Yeah, because there's the scene when Scaramanga shoots the guy outside the Bottoms Up Club, which was actually on Hanoi Road at the time in TST, and then Bond is taken away by Lieutenant Hip and put onto a boat next to Queen's Pier in Edinburgh Place. So somehow he made the leap over to the other side of the harbour to get onto the boat, and then he's taken to the wreck of the Queen Elizabeth, which is in the harbour over there. So they always take a few liberties with geography. But it's not just Bond. I mean, all films do that.
Are you a bit of a pedant on that front, or you don't mind?
I used to be, but I've realised that most people who watch these films aren't really going to be as familiar with Hong Kong as most people who live here, or certainly me.
He has a powerful weapon. He charges a million a shot. An assassin, second to none. The man with the golden gun. Lurking in some dark way, or crouched on a rooftop somewhere. In the next room of this very one, the man with the golden gun.
So who were the leading ladies on this film?
The 2 leading ladies were the 2 Swedish actresses, Maud Adams, who I think she went on to star in Octopussy as well later on, and Britt Ekland. Maud Adams played the Scaramanga, the main baddie, his girlfriend, who does some of his kind of menial tasks like picking up his payments for him, and Britt Ekland plays the kind of kooky intelligence contact that Bond has when he arrives in Hong Kong.
And Scaramanga is the baddie?
Scaramanga is the baddie, yes. Scaramanga was played by Christopher Lee, who actually has a real-life link to Ian Fleming, because I was reading recently that Christopher Lee is actually Ian Fleming's cousin, which I hadn't realised when I originally saw the film. So that was quite a nice little kind of link between the two. Christopher Lee himself was an intelligence officer during the war, along with his cousin, so it's quite interesting. But Christopher Lee wasn't really a stranger to Hong Kong either, because he'd been over a few years before to make a couple of films. Might have heard of them. One of them was The Vengeance of Fu Manchu, in his not-so-politically correct Chinese makeup. And he was also briefly in another film in 1967 called Five Gold Dragons, starring Bob Cummins, and he was one of the Golden Dragons, one of the kind of a mafia master. So he'd been in before anyway.
When you're watching this, I mean, are you a Bond fan yourself?
Yeah, I grew up in the 70s and 80s in the UK, so it's Roger Moore was always on the TV at Christmas, probably. I think Roger Moore was the main Bond that I was familiar with as a kid. So yeah, I've always kind of loved the films, but I think as as I've got older, the films that have the more technological kind of gimmicks in it were less appealing to me. I know I preferred the more old school, going back to closer to reality kind of films. So I'm a big fan of the Daniel Craig ones. But also, I think my favourite film is actually On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which starred George Lazenby. So, yeah.
Yes, the one-off Bond.
His eye may be on you or me. Who will he bang? We shall see. Love is required whenever he's hired. He comes just before the kill. No one can catch him, no hitman can match him for his $1 million skill. One golden shot.
How long was the Bond shoot here?
It was only a few weeks. I mean, Guy Hamilton had come over.
That's the director, yeah.
Yeah, Guy Hamilton was the director. He came over with a very small crew in the November of 1973, and he actually filmed the shots we see of the Queen Elizabeth wreck in the harbour, and also using a stuntman, because Roger Moore wasn't available until the following year. The stuntman, Mike Lovett, was doubling for Roger Moore as he jumps off the boat onto the shipwreck, which is in the film. And then obviously the next scene cuts away to Roger Moore going through the studio set of the shipwreck. And then the actual proper filming didn't start until April. And all the Thai scenes, all the scenes filmed in Phuket were filmed before they came to Hong Kong. So the finale of the film was actually made very first. And then at the end of April, they came to Hong Kong to do all the filming at the Dragon Garden over on Castle Peak Road towards Tuen Mun, which is the famous villa with the garden with the ornate kind of statues and glazed effigies.
So, Phil, have you been up there to sort of impersonate Bond, like in those opening scenes?
No, I haven't, because, I don't know if it's open to the public yet. I know the owner, she rescued it from demolition about 10 years ago and has spent many years trying to restore it to its former glory. And I think the intention was they wanted to open it to the public, but I think even now it's you have to be part of a group or
okay.
So
something I might look into.
Yes, exactly, because it would be lovely to go up there. The film itself, The Man with the Golden Gun, very much was responsible for Phuket becoming such a huge tourist attraction in following years, because when they were filming there, it was just a small village and in the middle of nowhere. And it's a real shame that Hong Kong hasn't really been able to capitalise on such a major film being here. And I mean, Dragon Garden would have been perfect, because it features in several scenes, including when Bond jumps over the wall and pretends to be Scaramanga, and then again later when Scaramanga assassinates the owner of the villa, to tie up the loose ends.
My thanks to Phil Kenny. If you'd like to have a look at his blog, then just type Hong Kong and Macau film stuff into Google. Thanks for listening, and join me next week on Hong Kong Heritage.